But, good morning, all of you, and thank you very much for inviting me here. So, and I like to thanks to the organizer for such a wonderful event. So today I'm going to speak on digital forensics in financial crime. So I was told that some students are also attending. So maybe for the first few slides, maybe I like to speak something very basic concept because digital forensics is very new, but probably so many questions came from the last session. So probably that digital forensics is going to answer that. But still, that field is at very nascent stage. But especially if you are working in law or maybe technical disciplinary area, so this is the gray area which can actually you can choose as your area to progress because probably this is going to stay for at least 2-3 decades because now everything is digitization, so everything changed. So due to security reasons, so and definitely when you talk about regulations and innovations, so they cannot match. So innovation go at very high speed, but on the other case, when you talk about regulations, they are always lagging behind. And due to which the digital forensics are very important. So today I'll start with these introductions and some of the key steps that that we are using for digital forensics that I'm to speak. And generally in my talks, in my lectures, I generally use case studies to define any concepts or to understand any real-time things because that makes more sense. And then followed by some of the conclusions. So in my case studies, I will cover mostly global context, but also I have stuff from the African context. With that, I like to have some clarifications and question and answers. So if you have. So with that, when you talk about digital forensics, so basically it's a branch of forensic science that focuses on identifying, preserving, analyzing, presenting digital evidence found on electric devices. So what are these terms? So maybe we'll see in more details when I go in the succeeding slides. So that gives you more of it. Maybe now you have heard many terms like cyber law. So our conference is on that. And definitely there is cyber security and there is IT audits. So maybe the question comes how these terms are different or they are same or how they are interrelated, and then come the digital forensics. So what is role of it? So when you talk about cyber law, so it's basically the guidelines, the rules that is figure out to prevent some crime. So this is basically something happening. Similarly, when you talk about cyber security, so this is again we are actually monitoring it to prevent anything. So this is before also and after also. Because if something happens, definitely we are going for making it more cyber secure and this. When it comes to IT audit, so this is basically more related to a particular company. So company have their own rules, and based on that, they audit it whether the procedures are followed or whether the company guidelines are met or not. Now come to digital forensics. So now when everything fails, when some event happens, so now who will be responsible for that? In many cases, due to lack of evidences, so the people actually escape, and the fraudster and the people who actually committed a crime, they escape. So in such case, we'll try to understand how digital forensics can help actually to identify those things, because when you go to court and you present some digital evidence, in most of the cases, court doesn't accept it. So now we have the laws, we have everything, but still, people are doing crimes and they're flying. So in this case, I will try to bring up some of the case studies in very global context. So you see that what amount of crime they are doing, and maybe some of the actually maybe 5 to 10% of cases are actually we are able to capture, but most of the cases they are still they are going around and we cannot do anything due to lack of evidence. So now if you look into the modern crime, especially because now we shifted to the digital form. So as a result, if you see particularly the digital forensic market, so in 2024, it's amount to be like 11.69 billion USD, and it is going to be grow to 47.9 billion by 2034. So with a cumulative average growth rate of 15.15%. So this is from the precedence research. So now if you look into particularly the emerging countries, like India and South Africa. So mostly, they are most crimes are happening. So just an example I'm taking, but still in the developed country also this is going on. But if you alone look into the market, like the Indian digital forensic market, so it is going to be like 1.349 billion by 2030. And similarly, if we look into the South African market, it is like $720 million by 2030. So which is account to be 2% of the total forensic market. So that is a very huge thing. But the problem is now we don't have any skilled people. I mean, the lack of people who can actually do it, or maybe the number of people are very less. So that is why I'm telling, if you are want to make your career in this part, so definitely this is a very great choice, and it is actually very interesting to work on that, and we'll see that. So basically, at the end, so what basically the digital forensic is? So it happens only when the event happens. So if there is some crime happen or some event happen, then only there is a the need for digital forensics, because they have to analyze, they have to preserve, they have to investigate, and they have to prepare a report which can be admissible to the court. So by that way, the people can get the justice. So it is a chain of custody and integrity that your digital forensics is maintaining. And now, if we talk about the key uses, so definitely cyber crime investigations, so frauds and financial crime, data breaches, IP properties. So our large speakers speak about it, but this is only just one part. Then we have the insider threats, because in finance, insider trading, we take it as a crime. And actually, this is a crime, because when we see the example, so it will come to it. So now, when we talk about digital forensics, it has basically 4 steps. So it started with identifications, because it is very important to identify that which particular device is get affected, or from which the crime has been happened. So it could be your computers, it could be your smartphones, the cloud accounts, because generally we store our data in clouds. So it could be breached. So then we have the servers, because we have our own servers, regional servers. Then we have the global servers, and then the network logs. And then now we are talking about cryptocurrencies, blockchains. So even the crimes can happen there. Actually, many crimes are happening there. So when you take this case study, it will be more. And then come the IoT devices, because now when you are entering into the bank, so generally bank is going to track you from 50 meters before. So just to know your intentions, whether you are really coming to the bank for some services or you are coming for some crime. So based on your posture, gestures, or how what kind of whether you are sweating or what kind of mood you are, how you are entering. So based on everything, so they try to understand you what you are going to do, and they try to predict. So and this is only done by series of these computers. Then you have these cameras and different audio recordings. So they are doing it. Now the next part is when something is identified. The next part is prevention. Because whenever some crime happened digitally, so it is very important that nothing should be written after that. So we should keep the data intact in this original. So there could be many things can be done for this prevention. So like write blockers. So whatever has been done up to this crime, so it will be blocked, or maybe they can create a image of that, so that if something added or something modified or deleted, it can easily be caught out. And then come the bit by bit disk imaging. So if something happens in your computer, because everybody has these disks, so they go by bit to check if there is any thing is overwritten or something is deleted. Because many times we find that the experts, they are able to recover your item which is already deleted. So these are some of the part, and then you have to do the secure chain of custody. So you have to give a very reasonable, logical reason that everything is preserved in a scientific and in lawful manner. Because if it is not done, then it is not admissible to the court, and due to which many times so people are getting failed. And then come the hashing. So this is more related to your blockchains, because you use the hash keys. So if you change anything, that hash key will change. And because everybody, they are storing the records, because you can have your laptop, you can have your laptops, you can have your laptops. So you are storing it in your clouds, but it is connected through chain. But you have the copy of this transaction. So if you change anything, so hash key will change, and immediately when you look into the other copies, you will find out that some kind of modification has been happened. And actually, these things happens, during this Ukraine and Russian war. So Estonia. So Estonia is the only country in European Union, not only European Union, probably in the globe, where everything done digitally, including the voting system. But their system is so secured, but instead of that, the Russian hackers hacked it. But the main part is they cannot change anything, because everything is recorded in blockchain. So even if they try to attempt change something, immediately they come to know this thing has been changed. So that is how this hashing part is coming. Now come to the analysis part. So now we have the identification, now we have the preservation. So we have to analyze it, actually what is the event and how it goes. So we start with the file recovery, because the first thing is people, who do the crime, they try to remove the digital stamps or footprints. So you have to do this. You have to do the registry analysis because everything that you search in your computer, there is a registry. Maybe some of you know how to delete it, but still permanent deletion is very difficult sometimes. So we can always recover it. So then we have the timeline reconstruction because generally this is the best way to do anything. So some crime happened, and then exactly we prepare a timeline which could be the actual one, and then we tie up. This is the event one, and this is the actual timeline. And if there is any mismatch, so that is the point where the crime happened. So this is how they do it. And then there is a malware analysis. So we'll take some example where we'll see that sometimes hacker actually put, the special software or some program with execute automatically. So maybe in a layman's language, if you see any program file like .dll or .batch, so these files are basically this malware. So maybe for your Windows, we also have similar kind of files. So sometimes it is very difficult to identify it. But generally, we don't delete such kind of files because these are readily executable. And if you actually delete some original file, your window will not work. So that is why it is not recommended. But sometimes if you're expert, you can easily identify there are some DLL function or some batch function which comes into our server or some databases, and due to which the crime has been affected. Then the log correlation. So now this is very important because now every company, when you enter to the system, so you have to log in with your username and passwords. So that is how they store everything. And probably when you come into this Wits gate, so you are swapping it. So basically, this is the log entry that you are coming. So like this, they are maintaining everything. And when you come to the memory access, so when there are some unwanted program, your computer performance will go very fast, and maybe it will hang sometimes. So this is also one way to understand, that some unwanted programs are running in the background in absence of your knowledge, so which can be a problematic to you. So that we can actually analyze through this memory forensics. And then come the crypto wallet and transactions. So because there are so many crypto publicly, some websites where you can actually track it. So if you have the wallet address, you can actually track, like what kind of transaction happened, or from where to where it went. So everything can be traceable publicly. So it is available online. And then come the reporting, because now you did analysis everything. So you have to prepare a detailed documentation charts and expert witness, because this is the expert who is in a detailed forensics. So he made this report on these things. So only after all of these things, if you produce a report in the code, then only it is admitted. So if you fail to do any of this, so this is not admitted in the code. So this is one of the biggest problem that is going on nowadays. Now, we try to understand that what are the tools available so that you can do. So for computer and mobile digital forensics, we have NCase and FTK. So NCase is basically for your analyzing the dates, and FTK is more related to your emails and all. So then we have this Cellbrite, UFD, Magnet. So these are basically for mobile device extraction, and this is for mobile cloud forensics. And also there is a open source computer forensics. So this is free. So you can actually use it even for your project purpose. So just if you want to do anything, so you can do it. So definitely network and RAM, these are very, very soft point where generally it is get affected, and due to which the entire system it got blocked. So I'm not talking about some, like 100,000 rand or something. So the crime goes in like, some 100 billions and like this. So you can understand what intensity they are doing. And so there are wire shark and there is volatility, as I said, like in case of RAM, if your activity is more, so probably, this is not a very normal behavior. So some suspicious things are there. So similarly, we have RAMs in our servers and other things. So it is very important to check that thing. And then come the blockchain, which is very recently because cryptocurrencies and everything is there. So we have chain analysis, TRM labs, so in which we can do the on-chain analysis. Because mostly you see the research that is done on only the prices of cryptocurrencies and volatility these things. Maybe this is only which is visible to us. But you have to see the on-chain thing, what is going inside. Like, how much amount of gas is actually each block is taking, or each module is taking, and what is the network consumption, so other fees. So that gives you some different views of your, looking into this particular track. So these are some of the tools. And now we'll see some of the case studies. So this will be very interesting to understand that how digital forensics actually, able to recover some money. and how it works in real time. So this is one very classic case from online banking fraud. So this happens in your Bangladesh bank. Why it is called haste? Because they try to loot the bank using your SWIFT system. So what is the incident here? So basically, they implement a malware in their networks, in their printers. So they try to make a fraud of like $100 billion. So, but they are able to take only 81 million because still the SWIFT system happens through phone. So just in a few seconds, the transactions of some billion dollar, it goes through this SWIFT network. But as you know, this network works 24 hours. But generally, like our stock market, suppose the stock market which is working now, probably in US it is not working now. So in other countries, but the SWIFT network is always on. So what they did, they actually they try to store this amount and they try to bypass this amount to Malaysia, Sri Lanka through different casinos. And how they come to know? Just instead of foundation, they use a word like foundation, FAUNDATION. So there is a spelling mistake. So they very cautious. So they try to understand why it is happening. So then they immediately, stop that particular SWIFT transactions. And as a result, only they are able to take like 81 millions. And in this case, particularly the network compromise, and there was a malware in the banking servers because the internal security of this bank was very weak. And as a result, they actually control the printer. So generally, when there is a SWIFT transaction, so they give a invoice or some kind of transaction to printers. So they block the printer through that malware. So they don't get any message, and actually they do this transaction at night. So when nobody is working. So now, why they didn't come across this particular time? Because when they come in morning, so actually there is no page come out from this printer, and that is how they blocked it. So now the next question comes, how they have collected the digital evidences. So you see the message log. So they use the SWIFT message log. They use the operating system they are using. So using the SWIFT terminal, they checked it. And also they check the malware binaries. So malware binaries are like your .dll file or batch files or similar files. So they find it similar files in the bank server. And then they also check the printer logs. So that files are actually blocked it. So to do that, what kind of forensic tools they use? So the log correlations, because as I said, they compared all the timestamps. So they prepare a exact, the actual timeline and what happened in that particular event. And when there is a mismatch, so they find this is the point where actually they targeted. And then they try to find out this malware thing, and they find that actually this malware is sitting in this bank server, which actually stop the message and disable the printer at night, so that transfer alert cannot be sent to these banks. And also they check with the network forensics, so there is a unauthorized control and all of this. So now the next comes about your forensic report. So in the report, they told like that the transaction was not by human error, but it is due to the malware created. So that error the SWIFT environment. And now, by that time when that haste happened, so there was no law to control such kind of things in SWIFT. But after that, things become very cautious, and they come up with this particular strict framework by Basel to control this mandatory SWIFT framework. And also nowadays, the central bank are also consider the logs as a regulatory asset. So before that, they don't used to consider this. So this is one very classical case. So where this malware actually they used to paste a particular bank. Next, we'll see that how we are talking about AI. So there is algorithmic trading, and even so many things are going on. And even in 2015, so actually due to algorithmic trading, they try to control the entire the NYSE market. So it was dipped by a lot of things. So similar this kind of example. But here we try to focus that how the digital forensics works and how that particular person was get caught by using that. So this is the case of the flash crash. So the person involved is Navinder Singh Sarao. So he uses spoofing. So spoofing means like in financial terms, like he is placing the very false order. in the futures. And so he's not placing the order to execute the trade, but just to manipulate the market. So whenever it is going to be heated, so he's using the algorithms and machine learning by which he is immediately canceling the order. So even if he give a very huge order, maybe like after execution of 1 or 2% of the order, he is immediately canceling it. So by that way, he is manipulating the price of the things, and due to which in May 6, 2010, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped to about 1,000 points. So which never happened before. So that is a big game. And after calculation, it was found that his personal profit were estimated like $40 million due to this these fall things. Now, how they come to know? So they used the high frequency order book. So what is order book? So if you are trading in the market, you know what is order book. So because to make it more transparent, it is visible to the investors or the traders, so that they can see that what is the ask and your sell price. So by that way, they can determine it. So they see that there is a high frequency order book and there is a timestamp trade and the cancellation record. And they use the sources IP. So it's the same IP from where everything is executed and the algorithm is executed. So now try to understand, maybe when you talk about the law, so generally they go by the rules, but it is not always the case, because nowadays if you go into the digital part, it is more from rule based to the evidence based. So in this particular case, they provided the evidence, and that actually give you the actual scenario that how things have been happening. So in this case, what kind of forensic tool they used? So they recreated the order book, rebuilt the market, and they try to understand that if the market is normal, if it is not done by HFT, how the trading will go and how the prices will down. So similarly, like your simulation they have done, and they find actually it was manipulated. And they try to understand it through pattern recognition. So we have these AI tools, and then they do the causality analysis. So that actually, like we try to understand if there is some event, what is the cause. So they really find out, due to spoofing, it is actually, there is a higher demand of the prices, and due to which people are thinking that, the prices are going up, so they are running after it. And then the final forensic interference that is came. So there is a manipulation which was systematic and it is intentional, driven by a particular person. And one trade influenced the total global market from a home computer, because we have the IP address, so it is very easy to capture it. So now, before that, we don't have any anti-spoofing law. But after this incidents, so more laws came. Particularly, there is we have this grant and dot that is very very popular in US that we use for security. And then we have this algorithm registration and audit trail. So nowadays, if you are doing with HFT, it is mandated that you register your algorithm with your particular regulators. So this is the second case, and now this is the third one, like called ransomware. So like if somebody kidnaps somebody and asks for some money, so how it is done in digital space. So this is also a crime. So how we can do this? Because there is no clear-cut, laws or some rules that can say that if some kind of ransomware is happening in digitally, how to address it. So even if some people is promoting it, how to deal it, because they are also doing the wrong thing. You should not give money to some, blackmailers or somebody. So how to do it? So this is a very classic case. This is from the colonial pipeline. So this is the major US fuel pipeline that operate. And it was attacked by ransomware. So what they did, so they compromised the VPN credential. They shut down the operations for several days. What happened? So here the employees of this particular company, they don't change their password very frequently. Probably if you are working in Wits, you are getting a message every month, please change your password for the security reasons. So probably now you can understand why it is important. And also their password was very simple, very easy to crack. And also many times they don't log out from the system. It is also a very dangerous part where, the attacker, they try to attack it. So basically due to all of these things, their system compromised and, they stalled everything. And now they're asking that, if you don't give us this money in crypto payment, we are going to stall your everything. So they stall it for, like few days or like a week, and due to which there is a huge amount of loss. So instead of reporting this to the law agency, they decided to give this money to this, these people. So they actually paid like 4.4 million Bitcoin to these attackers. And through the after that, with the help of your U.S. Judicial Department of Justice, so they are about to get like 2.3 million of that ransom from the government. But now, how they did it? So first they collect these ransom addresses, and they try to understand what kind of transactions are there, and they also check from which exchange it is done, and also they check the servers. And they found that there is a kind of clustering in the wallets. So it is the one person who is actually controlling all the wallets. So now they use this blockchain graph analysis. So they track, from where this BTC went to which wallets. So as I said, this is readily available. And sometimes, if your wallet for your privacy, there is a private key. So generally, this is not shared unless it is gone. But since this is crime happened, so now they have the power to, force that particular people to share your particular private hash key. So this particular term is known as subpoints. So subpoints means, for that particular wallet who is holding, so lawfully you can ask them to share your private keys. So the same thing they have happened, and then after that they find out that there is a kind of volatility clustering of these wallets, and into which these things have been happening. So what is the policy outcomes? So now they have used this analysis. So I told like your analysis and other things, you can actually get these on-chain analysis. And there is a now email obligations now in place. So people are thinking on this. So by that way, it got, and they try to recover at least even some crypto, this kind of frauds. The next part is your insider trading, so which is very common in finance. Like we use the private information to manipulate the stocks, but how we can actually trace back using the digital forensics. So in this case, the incident happened with Raj Ratnam between 2008 and 2009. So he tried to use the insider messages to inflate the stock prices. So how he was caught? So in this case, digital footprint of wire tape. So first time, they started tapping the phone calls that he was using, and also the emails, calls, records, trading logs that he is using is used. And this investigation took like 1 or 2 years between 2008 and 2009, and they find that around he made $60 million from that particular insiders. So now, what are the digital evidence they have collected, like your phone metadata, email timestamp, and your trading records, the corporate event timeline. So they actually create a particular same timeline which that can happen in normal instances and what actually happened. So based on that, they easily traced out. So these are the points where he actually calculated. So again, this is more like not in-based things, but more on evidence-based things they are providing. So event trade alignment, they when it is executed, so maybe when when it is announced actually, so if something happens before that, it is very easily to track, that you are using some insider things to manipulate it. So and then they use this communication network. So the timing of his call, this particular people of this particular companies before this event. So this gives a tracks. And also they use some the statistical abnormality, because like we call about abnormal returns. So when there is a very unexpected return, so we try to understand why it is happening, because we assume that our market is efficient. So but when it is not efficient, so if you are manipulating it, it's very easy to cause. So forensic interference, that trading decisions were information driven. So it's not very skill based, because he actually manipulated it. So it's not coming from the skill. And then the digital communication that created, so there is a trend. You cannot remove this, all of this. So by that way, this is come, and nowadays, even the wet trips are also considered as a evidence in the court. So this is the first case when this is introduced in US. Now this is very interesting case. So probably you think that dark webs are there. So can we actually control them? So actually, there are incidents where many dark webs actually, are got caught, and even you don't imagine what kind of things they use for digital forensics to catch them. So Silk Road was very famous, and it was operated in the dark web. So basically, it was used for illegal drugs and other kind of any illegal activities they used to promote here. So now it was online launched in 2011 using Tor. So Tor is a network provider, so that hide your IP and everything. But again, this is a technology. So don't believe that they can always hide your IP address. So it is always traceable. But this particular person, Ross, he thought that I'm using this particular network, nobody can actually track me. But there are smart people are still there, so they can track it. And the other thing, he was controlling everything from a one end. So which he named it as Dread Pirate Robots. So and through that it is estimated like he handled like $1.2 billion in Bitcoin transactions. So this is a quite big amount. And through the law enforcement, so they went to seize like $30 million by that time when he was arrested. So now how he got arrested, that is very very interesting case. So like what kind of digital evidence they have collected? So they have collected the Bitcoin transaction graph. So from your on-chain analysis, and they do the server images because from where server it is done, and also the forum messages because in dark webs mainly message through which they do the deal, and also they check the login timestamps. So then they use different kinds of graphs to identify from where it is came, and also he is using the same username because he is believing that Tor network is not going to reveal him. So he is using this and using the same Wi-Fi, and then so from his sleeping pattern, people got him because when he was sleeping, so he's not using that login, and that system is not in use. So again, if you look into the law book, so there is no such law which tell that you can put it as evidence. But since it is evidence based, you are providing to the court, it is admissible, and by that way, this particular person got caught. So here, pseudo anonymity failed due to human behavior. So even though Tor tried to hide him, but after all he's a human. So due to his behavior, he caught, and then he put that digital footprint, which is almost very difficult to remove. So he was caught, and what is the policy outcome? So now we have this dark web monitoring unit, and also we have some enhanced crypto surveillance capability. And so this happened somewhere in 2007 or 2011 or 12. But we have many cases like your Alpha Bay, then your Hansa Market. So Hansa Market case is like honey trap. So police itself, they registered and they started using their system for 1-2 months to understand who are the people who are working, and by that way they catch. And similarly, we have this ArchStep, so often known as Operation Deep Sentinel. So where it happened somewhere in 2020. This is the recent case. So where again this dark web got. But now at least using this detailed forensics, we can provide some evidences by which we can put into the code. So now, if you look into from the policy aspect, so we have taken some 5 case studies. So maybe we have seen in many cases there are design failure, and many cases it is regulatory failure. But if we again rank, so mostly it is, you see in the 3 cases it is regulation failure rather than the design failure. So probably as I told that innovations and regulators, they cannot match their speed, but still we always try to improve how regulators or things can match up with that. So maybe now we look more on the evidence of things rather than just only code or rule books. So that is also there, but still, if you provide a particular evidence through this digital forensics, it is admissible in the code, particularly in this kind of cases. So now the last example I will take from the African context. So like you heard about this Mulot syndicate, so which works in Kenya. So this is related with M-Pesa. So this is a very famous case that is running, even. So the module of operandi is like SIM swapping, cloning, and they're using the social engineering, phishing, dedicated apps, phishing. So in Kenya, they are using M-Pesa for providing the government subsidiary and other things. But now the problem is, it's very easy to create a SIM because they are using the fraud identity. Maybe they are using your identity. Somehow they stolen, and with that they are taking the SIMs, and very easy way they are doing the SIM swapping. And this happens through the agents. So it's not from outside who are actually working with this M-Pesa group. So they are actually working on it. So this is from the insider they're coming, but there is no rules, regulations which can stop this. So these things happens with the common people. So they don't know how to report it to the police and how they're going to act it. But when it happens to a politicians in Kenya, then they immediately started reacting to it. Because a particular politician, he lost some millions of Kenyan uh, their dollars. So by that way, it comes into notice, and they started tracking it. That what is going on. So then they found it is the agent groups or who are controlling this particular network. So they are responsible for this swim shopping, and sometimes they are making fraud calls, and through which they are taking your identity and they are doing this. So they use the call data records, they use the forensic imaging, and they also track the money flow because suppose you do some transactions which is very regular, like purchase of groceries or something. But if there is some unwanted things happens, so they track it, whether it is done like this. So there was a failure from the security because they think that that our particular system is very much sophisticated, but in reality it was not. So it was just their assumption that we are having a very tight security, we are using very sophisticated system, but it was not the case. So this happens here, and then there is a data breach. So and there are internal collisions because it is the people who are internally who got involved in these particular scams. So there was operational security failure. So again, I told you that when it comes to legal perspective, so generally for digital evidence, court is very not very friendly for this particular thing. So these are some of the examples. So maybe before they are very reactionary, like they are taking things lightly and how to report this. But nowadays they are trying to be more proactive and they try to do it everything immediately. That is why things are now more intelligent. Right? So they are using different softwares and different forensics angles to come up with different. But definitely crimes are going on, but still things innovations are going on in this place. So what a conclusion. So we have seen that some of the common forensic primitives like timestamp. So even if you are doing some crime, careful about this because you are easily tracked. Because criminals are always looks like this, so even you cannot identify them. So they look at these network graphs, the behavioral deviations, like you see in case of at what time he's sleeping. So by that way they caught him. So then nowadays we talk about blockchain and other immutable record. So I think already in some African countries they already implemented this, particularly in case of educations, because frauds are going with DP certificates. So when they are putting it in blockchains, so it is very difficult to implement. And then come the digital finance, it raises enforcement capacity, but at the same time, as I told that there is always a trade-off between regulations and innovations. But still, our aim is to reduce that gap, and things are coming, and maybe in the next decade we'll see more and more new process. So with that, I'll stop here. And thank you very much for your attention. So I'd like to take your questions and
Prof, if I ever steal money, I won't sleep. Wow, my mind is blown by this presentation, and by that summary slide, that the table. I found it interesting how regulation and design were always the primary causes of issues. After all, we are here today speaking about resilient and responsible design governing AI, expression, and digital media.